Leslie Rayner is going to talk to us now about the conservation work to the actual mural itself. To say this was a public-private partnership, this whole project, and the city is, of course, the owner and the guardian of this mural. And what the Getty brought to the project was to address the conservation needs of the mural conservation itself. And as I said before, Leslie was our project manager in charge of that aspect of our project. Leslie.
Thank you, Susan, for the reintroduction. Thanks, Susan, for the reintroduction. And following the overview of the comprehensive project, those wonderful insights of Jesus Trevino and Jaime Mejia Servin on the early preservation efforts, and the viewpoints that you've gotten from the architect and the city on the construction, I'm just going to talk now about the conservation that Susan just mentioned, which was a part of the larger comprehensive collaborative project between the city and the GCI, but that was the part that the GCI was directly responsible for. And I'm going to start from the study of the original technique used by Siqueiros to paint the mural through to the conservation treatment that the GCI has just completed. Beginning with a study of the original technique, we have combined historic research, visual examination, and scientific analysis to learn about the innovative techniques Siqueiros used to paint América Tropical. As many of you may know, Siqueiros was a great experimenter, and when he came to Los Angeles to teach a fresco class at Chouinard Art School, he discovered a variety of modern tools and materials that were being used in construction and in the film industry here, especially the extensive use of cement in modern construction. And he developed this modified fresco technique that Jaime Mejia Servin already described, using cement instead of the traditional lime and sand plaster with which true frescoes made. We have a record of this in papers that he wrote while he was in Los Angeles, and which we're fortunate enough to have actually at the Getty Research Institute. The most relevant of these papers is his manifesto that he wrote while he was here, titled The Technical Revolution of Painting. In this manifesto, he writes about the technique that he developed while here. And this is just quoting from those papers. The skeleton process of working is this. First, the drill gun or hammer cleans the wall, makes holes to improve the solidity of the application, and generally roughens the surface, making that particular texture which is necessary for cement frescoes. Second, the cement is put on in small patches, just like the old lime plaster used to be put on, and the color is applied with the air gun while the cement is still wet. Third, after the cement has crystallized, it's waxed with a mineral wax. Only the airbrush or spray gun is used in execution as the most important element of painting. The airbrush gives us the possibility of speed and a new conception of mind of aesthetics, because new elements and instruments require a new aesthetic. Without the airbrush, this giant fresco, which is 1,476 square feet, would take more than a year to complete. In fact, Siqueiros completed it in about 6 weeks, starting at the end of mid-August and finishing up by October of 1932. Visual examination shows that he clearly did use some sort of a fresco technique. As you can see here, these in blue are the plaster joins across the mural, and those are very similar to how a true fresco or bone fresco would be laid out in sections that are called giornata and that could be painted in a day. You also see here we have some traces of snap lines and some incisions that were made in the preparation of the painting. Photographs show him at the time with some of his assistants using an airbrush, and this photo is actually from when they were painting Street Meeting, but there's no reason to think that he did anything differently on América Tropical, which he painted directly after he finished Street Meeting. And we actually have another account by Grace Clements, in which she says, far into the nights or mornings, he and the block of painters worked, covering portions of the 80-foot brick wall with cement, applying deep greens, ochres, and reds by the modern technique of the airbrush, shattering the stillness of deserted streets. And in this next image, I'm just showing you a picture of him with some of the block of the mural painters. There's Siqueiros in his trademark overalls that he would always wear. And more importantly in this picture, or as importantly in this picture, this is América Tropical partially completed. You see in this lower corner a cartoon, which is a large sheet of paper that he would make a preparatory sketch on, perforate it, and then apply dry pigment through the perforations to place that element on the wall in preparation to paint it. And we actually have another quote from one of his assistants that talks about how he applied how they set out the cartoon for the central figure on that last night before the mural was unveiled, and how they pounced the mural by applying that dry, burnt umber in the perforated holes to show the design before they painted it. From there, the GCI has done materials analysis, and in 1987 and 88 was the first analysis to identify the pigments that Siqueiros used in his painting. Oh dear, I'm sorry, I'm going backwards. To identify the pigments that he used in his painting. And they confirm the same mineral pigments that Siqueiros described using. The yellow ochre, the raw umber, burnt sienna, red ochre, all the typical pigments that you would see in fresco painting as well. In terms of binding media, however, after repeated analysis and using different and more sophisticated and sensitive techniques, we have not been able to positively identify a binding medium so far. The traces of polyvinyl acetate that we found were taken from samples in 2002 and correspond to a consolidation layer that was actually applied in the 1990 treatment. So that's still to be done. But other than that, this is a summary then of what we know about the original technique. It appears that it was painted in a modified fresco technique on cement using spray gun, but there are details that suggest that he came back with a brush after using the spray gun and modeled the forms and figures to give elements depth and dimension, as in this sculptural figure here that's in the lower right of the mural, where you can actually see brushstrokes and impasto pretty clearly. And this is the area of the mural that actually is the best preserved. Because Siqueiros was such an innovator, I think we can extrapolate that he may have started in fresco and added these kind of details, the modeling around the hair and the head and down the shoulder and on the face. And he may have added those in secco to obtain this effect. And that's actually common in fresco paintings as well. But much of that original final paint layer is lost, as seen in other areas of the mural, for example, on this chalk mold figure on the lower left, the one that you saw in that cartoon. And this may be, at least in part, a result of the technique that Siqueiros used. In many areas, that final layer may not have adhered well to the cement substrate right from the start. And then as we move on to the conservation, the history of the conservation of the mural, I think that we can see more of what might have happened over time. We know that the mural was partially whitewashed soon after it was painted from an article by Arthur Millier that was dated in December 1934. And note that that little sculptural figure that's the best preserved is actually in this corner. And in fact, this whole area, if you see, is a little bit better preserved than the rest of the mural, a little ironically so. But the mural was then completely whitewashed by the end of the decade, and then it was left and mostly forgotten on that second-story exterior wall of the Italian Hall for the next 20 years until the whitewash began to fail in the 1960s. And the mural became visible once again, as Jesus Trevino described, leaving it exposed and badly degraded. By 1978, you can see, as Jaime Mejia Servín described earlier, that it had lost the two upper corners. That was in the 1971 Silmar earthquake. And you can also see this band of tar that Jaime described along the base of the wall, waterproofing that adjacent roof. By 1980, and this is actually from 1990, but from 1980, I told you that there was a series of shelters that were put on the mural, to protect it and to shelter it until they actually remained in place until 2012, while funds were secured and while the project was still in design and development phase. Going on to the conservation treatment, as plans for conservation of the mural progressed, a pilot treatment was done by conservator Scott Haskins in 1989, and in 1990, a team of conservators from Mexico led by Agustin Espinoza carried out a preliminary phase of conservation, consisting mainly of the whitewash removal of that band of tar, surface cleaning, injection grouting of cracks and losses, filling of some of those larger losses, and surface consolidation. During the 1990s, the GCI did extensive documentation of América Tropical, and we did this early digital capture of the mural. You can see as the base of this condition map, which was an early Photoshop stitching project that resulted in a rectified high-resolution image that we've then used, as you can see, to do all of our mapping since then. And that condition recording has been done over time in 1997, again in 2002, and in 2012, as the GCI has been monitoring the condition of the mural and as a tool for developing our conservation treatments. We did a second round of plaster stabilization in 2002, mainly to reattach loose plaster by injection grouting of cracks and losses, and to surface clean the mural. At that time, a temporary rigid protection, smaller than the larger previous shelters had been, was put into place by the preparators from the J. Paul Getty Museum, and this was put into place in preparation for the construction of that canopy that then took 10 years to build. So most recently, a team of conservators led by myself and Emily Macdonald Korth of the GCI and Annette Zabala of Zabala and Partners carried out the final phase of conservation. Final phase for now, that is. The aim of the conservation treatment was to further stabilize the mural, improve its appearance through cleaning, stain and tar reduction and removal, and limited visual reintegration. I can run through the treatment steps here, and I think it's really interesting that they so closely match with the treatment steps that Jaime Mejia described in his talk earlier. So we really have followed this similar philosophy of conservation and line of thinking in the treatments ever since his first examination of the murals in the late 1960s. So to start, we did a gentle surface cleaning with water and sponges. Areas of heavier soiling were cleaned with a 2% ammonium citrate solution at pH 8.5. I'm going to go into these little technical details for some of the conservators in the audience. Grouting of cracks and losses was done using a commercially available injection grout, Jan M30, and this reattached the plaster to the wall and any areas where it might have been loose. Losses on the, that's the grouting, losses on the surface were filled with a cement, lime, and sand mixture that was worked out by our engineer here at the GCI. And paint was reattached, injecting Butevar B90 at 10% and isopropanol. Stains were reduced where possible using a 1-to-1 solvent mixture of acetone and toluene, and remaining localized areas of tar and tar stains were reduced or removed using a benzyl alcohol solvent gel and or that same 1-to-1 mix of acetone and toluene. The surface was consolidated and resaturated with golden mineral spirit acrylic varnish at a little bit lower than 7% concentration. And the two shutters and door that were incorporated into the mural composition were surface cleaned, consolidated, and repaired by Silver Lake Conservation in their studio and reinstalled during the treatment. In painting or visual reintegration addressed areas of mechanical damage and clear abrasions, such as scratches and scrapes that could be seen over much of the mural, as well as over fills and other areas of past treatments to match the surrounding original paint. And this type of scratches and scrapes were seen down the mural in many, many, many parts of it. And it was quite surprising to see how just filling those in started to bring the composition together. However, from there, we additionally continued reintegration to reinstate legibility to the mural and to reinforce some of the forms by connecting dots to bring back a continuity to the composition and make the iconography a little more readable, while still preserving the hand of the artist and the traces of history that the mural had suffered over the 80 years of censorship, neglect, and exposure. This was perhaps one of the greatest challenges of the project, given the degradation of the surface overall, and to determine the level to which reintegration should be brought up to. The use of an iPad and the PS Touch app, which is an Adobe app, it was a great innovation that Emily actually worked out, and which was very helpful during the treatment. It enabled conservators to use details from a high-resolution historic black and white image when the mural was first painted, overlaid with a current image of the same detail, to better locate forms and islands of original paint remaining on the surface to reinstate that legibility that I was talking about. And this is how it works. You have with your iPad, you take a picture of that detail where you happen to be working. You find the detail in the historic black and white image, and you superimpose them. Working with different opacities, you can go back and forth, identify where you are and what was there in the first place, and where you wanted to get to. It's pretty great. At the same time, following conservation, and this is where you get to. At the same time, following conservation philosophy and practice, we continually had to use our best judgment to keep the balance of respecting the hand of the artist, preserving the history of the mural, and at the same time, reestablishing legibility of the composition. That said, I'm just going to show you a few details as I'm talking. That said, there was never a question of restoring América Tropical to its original appearance, and that's for many reasons. First, because Siqueiros explicitly stated that he did not want that. Second, because in doing so, we would have repainted the entire surface of the mural and left no trace of the artist's hand or of the history told by the wear on the wall. And finally, we had no color documentation of the mural when it was first completed to determine the intensity or brightness of the palette. It's our hope that through careful examination, thorough historic research, and scientific study, along with best conservation practice, we've been able to preserve the authenticity of this mural, tell the story of its tumultuous past, and revive the clarity of the iconography painted by Siqueiros in América Tropical. By taking a holistic approach to the conservation and protecting the mural with a canopy to avoid any kind of direct water infiltration, we've taken precautions to ensure that the mural will remain in stable condition over time. The GCI has further committed to monitor and maintain the mural for the next 10 years. It's our hope that by visiting the Interpretive Center, the public can learn the story of the mural, the turbulent past it suffered, and its enduring significance for Los Angeles. From the viewing platform, we hope that visitors will be able to experience the story firsthand and appreciate the artistry, the history, and the complexity of David Alfaro Siqueiros' mural, América Tropical. And we invite you all to do just that this afternoon on the site visit to the Mural and Interpretive Center. With that, I'd like to conclude by acknowledging all of the people who've worked directly or indirectly on the actual conservation of América Tropical and thank them for all of their efforts over the course of the project. And I'd like to recognize the team that has just done the recent treatment, their hard work, and especially Emily Macdonald-Korth and Annette Zabala for their hard work, their dedication, and their incredible talent to bring this mural back to the public after all this time. Thank you.